Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining me. In this episode, I chat with Dave Escoto. Dave did many years on LAPD. He was already on the podcast back, I think, episode 5 or 4, one of the early ones he was on. He wore a bunch of different hats in his career, and I just so happened to get a bunch of questions in my email about undercover work, something I never really got into as a police officer. So I had Dave come back on, and he answered a bunch of the undercover questions. He talked a lot about his career and the time that he worked Vice. So really fun chat with Dave. Really glad to get him back. After I spoke with Dave, I answered one more question a listener wrote in about being a police officer and maintaining relationships, stuff like that. So without further ado, here's episode number 24.
This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gold.
Dave Escoto, thank you for coming back to the podcast, man.
Hey, thanks, Steve. I appreciate it. Anytime.
So like I mentioned to you before, I get questions a lot through emails, and a lot of times like they're asking questions that I don't really have any expertise in or something that I haven't done. And I got a listener send in a bunch of questions about being undercover and like doing that kind of work. I know you did that when you did Vice and stuff like that, right?
Right. Yeah, I wasn't really deep undercover, but yeah, we, plain clothes, grow beard, grow long hair, stuff like that. Just kind of mingling with the crowd. Right. Perfect. Yeah. So I figured I'd ask you to come on, and you could at least probably give a better answer. A lot of the stuff, I mean, where I was from, I did some like undercover buys of like stolen property when I was like a young patrolman, but it was, sure, once or twice, and that was it. All right, let's see. This listener wants to know. Well, it's kind of a very broad question, but what does it take to be an undercover police officer? Is there certain characteristics that you guys would all have? Yeah, you got to, integrity is the most important, because working undercover, one of the hardest things is to start feeling sorry for the bad guy. You don't want to assimilate with them, but you gotta know where you're coming from. You're there to whatever your job is. Mine in Vice was street prostitution, gambling, alcohol violations inside bars, outside on the streets, things like that. And you kind of start feeling for these people, but you gotta know that your integrity is that you're there to make lives better for everybody. And if you got a bunch of prostitutes out in front of your house or drinking or things like that, it makes life a little bit miserable for the people that live and work in Los Angeles. So that's what your job is, and you got to keep your integrity. It's kind of like it doesn't get like Training Day, Denzel Washington. He's just way over the top.
Right.
That's not what you want. And I've never ever seen a cop like that. But if there was, the guy'd be in jail. But you just gotta know where you're coming from, and you don't want the appearance of evil. And by that I mean, when you go into the station, you don't want to. Start telling, I just had a beer out in the street, I arrested this and that, make the uniform guys upset. And, you just got to know the balance. You got to keep your head. Gotcha. Yeah. I can imagine because these people too, that you're kind of infiltrating in a way, or you're getting inside with, they're just people. They have lives, they have kids. Oh yeah. They're good folks. They're just, maybe on a bad path at that point in their life. So it can make it probably really easy to sympathize. One of the hardest arrests was when I was working. We do gambling violations in Vice too, and the way you get the bookies is, one of the ways is you see who's buying the. I guess you can call it a cheat sheet, which shows all the odds on the horses all across the United States, and they're usually at the corner newsstands. So you just kind of hang around and see who's buying them, and follow them around, see if they're going to their house, people are coming in and out and things like that. And I made friends with this one guy that every Tuesday morning, I think it was Tuesday, because I think the tracks are closed on Mondays. It was a Tuesday morning, he'd come in and buy the cheat sheet every day. And I'd tell him, man, I wish I can go to the track. I don't have time. I got to get to work. And he'd say, well, I'll take your bet and this and that. And, you get to know them, and the nice people. It's just, it's a vice, and, it's not even a felony, but, bookkeeping is against the law. And, and I felt bad arresting the poor guy. He was an older guy and just trying to make extra money for his family and stuff. But yeah, you do what you got to do. You feel bad, but
now
it's just something you got to do.
What did that look like? Like when you went to arrest that guy, like, did he have a look on his face like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're a cop? Is that?
Nah, he just kind of looked at me, just shook his head and said, what, Dave, I'll be back on the streets before you're done with your reports. Good luck to you. Just stuff like that. And it's true. By the time he bailed out, and I'm still doing the reports, booking evidence, and he's back out doing what he's doing.
Right. All kind of like a game,
yeah.
part of the
game.
Pay to play for him, basically.
Exactly. He got caught and he knew it, and no hard feelings, but, he just makes him a little smarter, makes me a little smarter.
Did you have a lot of situations when you got to know someone you were working on and, started to like them, and then you had to arrest them? Was that a pretty common thing?
It's not really too common. You try to keep your distance from the people you're working. Sometimes you can't help it, like this bookmaker. It's a victimless crime, so to speak. I mean, the victims are the bettors' families. They lose all their money and they can't put food on the table or things like that. But there's no violence involved, and that's the kind of arrest you like to make, or the hardcore guys. But in Vice, it's mostly not. I had no desire to work narcotics whatsoever. I back when I was undercover, that's when they had the rock houses, and coppers were going into these houses and making buys and coming out and doing the search warrants, and there's no way I want to go into a house where they lock the door behind me.
Yeah,
and there's no way I wanted to do something like that. So, but there's a lot of guys that are willing to do it and want to do it.
End up jumping out a second-story window or something.
Yeah, right.
Oof. So another question was, do you think it's much harder now, or what role, I guess you'd say, what role would social media play now going undercover, and is it make things harder? Like, I guess, like, if you're doing undercover work or stuff like that, you probably shouldn't even have social media, I'm guessing, or maybe have it under your wife's name or something.
Right. The only type of social media that I know of that coppers use now are catching these guys that are going into chat rooms with young kids. They'll pose as a young kid and make friends with these people and end up making the arrest. But as far as social media, are you asking, do cops use it, or does it make it harder because of the bad guys using social media to find us?
I kind of muddied that up. I'll just read it verbatim, so I'm not putting words in the guy's mouth. Is it harder now with so much social media for undercovers to maintain their cover?
Yeah, back when I was undercover, we didn't have social media. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't even have beepers. So there was no internet back then. But I can imagine now how, if a guy is arrested by an undercover, how he could post the copper's name. You can find anybody's address really on the internet, which is unfortunate. There was a time when we could as police officers block our addresses, but there's so many sites now that it makes it pretty hard to keep your cover.
Yeah, that's true too. They could. I'm surprised it doesn't happen more often. I'm surprised the criminal element isn't putting coppers on blast. Doxing them, as they call it.
I can imagine when you're deep undercover, that you do a name change and the whole bit. I had an alias when I worked Vice for when I walked into the bars. I even went to DMV. They work with the cops and gave me a new driver's license with a new name and had my photo on it. And,
yeah, what was your name? Do you remember?
Robert Santini.
Nice.
I always wanted to be Italian.
That's funny.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a good time.
Awesome. So you touched on this a little bit, but the last question was, are famous undercover movies realistic at all, like The Departed or The Infiltrator or Donnie Brasco? You talked about Training Day there.
Yeah, yeah, they're a little bit over the top. I don't see them. It's Hollywood. You got to sensationalize everything.
Right.
I like the movies. I like watching them, but I've never seen or ran into anything that they're depicting that even comes close to what we used to do.
Yeah, that's kind of a common thing, I think, for cops to watch a movie about cops and just sit back and go,
Oh, yeah.
this is ridiculous.
Yeah. Like, wow, I wish like NCIS or, one of those shows where, they got all this trick stuff, science stuff that, you can catch the bad guy. I watch that and I think, man, I wish we had that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's making my job so much easier.
We used to, I remember doing that a few times when I just had a patrol level investigation, just telling, kids in their late teens that we had that stuff. It was being at the lab, being analyzed, and they would just confess because they had, they really believed it, that this little town on Cape Cod had this, DNA scanning equipment. My dad, I used to drive my dad nuts. He was a local police officer for like 34 years. And like we're saying about cops in movies, they were like whenever a town cop's in a movie, like you see him walking up, my dad would always be like, "Oh, look, here comes the retarded town cop. He's going to say something real dumb." And then,
man.
And then sure enough, in whatever movie it is, a town cop will come up and act like a jackaloon.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Drive him nuts.
Well, your dad's seen a lot too. I'm sure. 32 years. Wow.
Oh yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah, actually, I've been thinking about maybe asking him to come on, see if he wants to, because
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, have like a father-son episode.
Yeah, kind of like now.
Oh, mijo. Oh, mijo that's me.
That's you, mijo.
Mijo. So the other, excuse me, I'm just getting over being sick. The other thing people were asking about your episode was I think 4 or 5, so one of the earlier ones, but it was very popular and. You were very well liked and received.
Awesome.
Of course. But people wanted to hear more about when you worked internal affairs. And I think with guys like you that worked such a long career and worked for so many different divisions, I can't we can't get into everything. And sometimes people write in, they're like, "Hey, I wish you'd talk about this longer," but the episode would be 10 hours long, But people did write in and ask a few questions about like how did you get into internal affairs? What is it like? Are they really hated by other cops? Like things like that.
Yeah. Well, what happened with me is I've worked as a detective most of my career, and I worked for this one lieutenant who went to internal affairs, and he worked his way up into the special operations, which is the follow home team. They're undercover internal investigators, and if it's a really serious allegation against a police officer, and in order to prove or disprove, we want to follow the copper around. That's what these guys do, and it was called Special Operations Section. I think they've changed the name since, but I worked homicide at the time, and the lieutenant approached me. He called me and said, "Hey, can we meet at a restaurant? I want to talk to you." So I said, "Sure." So we met away from the station, and he and I sat down, and he said, "Hey, I want you to come and work my section. I want you to work this case." And I said, "Sure, what is it? I'd love to." And he goes, "Well, it's a police officer and his wife. He served his wife with divorce papers, and she came to internal affairs, and she's only a Spanish speaker, or just a Spanish speaker, I should say. And she said her husband had killed 2 people before he became a police officer. So he said, I want you to work the case because you have homicide experience. You have connections up and down California. She just speaks Spanish. So, I said, heck yeah, I'd love to do that case. So I took the case and, interviewed her and started moving forward. The guy used to live up north in Northern California before he was a cop. And that's supposedly where he murdered 2 people. But the wife gave me the names. What's that?
So it's not possible. Backgrounds never would have missed something like that.
Oh, tell me about it. Yeah. So anyway, I just I found the 2 people alive that she said he had killed, and what it was is it was 2 other women that this guy unfortunately was having affairs with. She found out about it, and he had told his wife, well, don't worry about them. I love you. I don't love them. In fact, they're not even on this earth anymore. He kind of insinuated he killed them.
Oh, geez.
So just to keep things between them cordial, I guess.
Right. You're still the only one for me because they're
yes,
dead.
I killed the other ones. Don't worry about them, honey. So, but I found them both alive, and it turned out, he was just talking smack with her, and unfortunately, there was really nothing we can do with him. I mean, I don't even know if he's still on the job or not. But
so that's interesting. So internal affairs isn't always. It also, I mean, the investigations also end up protecting police officers from bad claims and stuff like that.
Right. And working, and I ended up staying in that section for 3 years. That case took me about 4 months. And then I ended up staying for 3 years doing other cases. And excuse me, cases like coppers accused of fraud, insurance fraud, or accused of bringing people across the border illegally, flashing their badges and saying, hey, they're with me, and they'll be okay. I'll bring them back home or whatever. Just things like that. Stuff that coppers shouldn't be doing.
Wow, that's pretty brazen. You using your badge and your ID at like a federal checkpoint.
Yeah, exactly. And we caught 2 guys actually doing it. They were bringing back a couple of women from Mexico that they met in a bar. And they were they just wanted to bring them to San Diego to party a little bit, so they brought them across the border, and they were caught.
Wow.
So yeah.
That's
just
good.
Just things like that. Luckily, it's not really a lot of drugs, a lot of gun running. Things you'd see on on television or movies that cops allegedly do. You don't get a lot of that. Fortunately.
And you've seen that movie, Copland, right? With
yes,
Sylvester Stallone. Like that movie specifically, a lot of people get their internal affairs knowledge from, because that's like it's Robert De Niro plays the internal affairs guy. I think it's Robert De Niro, right? The city internal affairs guy.
I think so. Yeah.
He's kind of like obviously, excuse me, falling apart. He's a real straight arrow type of guy, but it's kind of insinuated in that movie that these guys aren't really well liked. In real life, do cops pretty much just realize it's a necessary division that has to exist, and you weren't like looked down on for it or anything like that?
Not really. And most coppers, hey, you got me, and if they did something, you own up to it. Especially when Chief Gates, when Daryl Gates was our chief, if somebody owned up to their mistake and it wasn't something outrageous, you'd get a spanking, and all was forgiven, and come back on, come back to the job. Welcome back. But you'd take 2-3 weeks off, a couple of months off without pay. That hurts, especially if you have a family.
Sure.
But if you write a report and you put false information on it and turn it into the courthouse just to make an arrest, just to get a guy convicted, you don't do that. If you don't have enough evidence to get the guy, he goes free, and get him next time. You can't make things up just to make yourself look good.
Right. Yeah. It's super important that even exists. Good for people to hear about that.
Yeah.
Because it's important to police officers too, to have that someone, watching the watchers, as they say.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And LA, and I'm sure our other departments, I can't say I've never worked any other department, but we pride ourselves on cleaning up our own. It's, if they've done something wrong, then take the hit and let's move on.
Absolutely, totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, I think I asked all the questions I called to ask.
I appreciate that. It's always fun.
I appreciate you coming on again, and don't be surprised if I don't try to rope you into coming on once again with all the specialties you've had in your career.
Anytime, you know where to find me.
All right, brother. Thank you.
All right, bro. Bye.
Hey guys, you were just listening to the always interesting and handsome Dave Escoto. Before we go, I'm gonna answer one more listener question that came in. I have a bunch of listener questions. I appreciate all the write-ins, and I will get to them over the course of a few episodes. I really appreciate them. I just don't want to do too many in one episode and have you guys get sick of it or anything. So this gentleman writes in, and he says he listens to podcasts all the time, and he's wondering, he said he's aspiring to be a police officer, and his girlfriend has some concerns about their future, what it will be like being in a relationship with a police officer. People around her are telling her that there's high divorce rates with cops. There's an unbalanced life. It's hard to deal with being married to a cop. So he wants to know, is there anything I can tell him about that, being a police officer in relationships, or can I shed some light on the subject? Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's exactly what you want to hear. I'm sorry, I'm still coughing from the mild case of AIDS that I've been trying to get over here. So basically, it can be rough. My wife and I were dating when I went into police academy, and of course, we were in our 20s then. She was very supportive. She even woke up at 4:30 in the morning with me some mornings to help me iron creases into my uniforms, make sure I had everything squared away, help me made my lunch when I was doing other things. So she was super supportive, because police academy it's a good little test for how stressful it can be for a spouse, because it's a pain in the ass. It's a real pain in the ass going through police academy, and your significant other needs to be pretty committed to helping you out, or at least putting up with the long hours that you'll be doing. So my wife was really cool with that, and she was right there to help me out. Now, when I graduated police academy, like many places, I went right to midnight shift, overnight shift. So, and I stayed there for 5 years. So that's not the best shift for your social life. And when you're a new cop, you also are going to miss all the holidays, all the cookouts, all that fun stuff. You're going to miss a lot of that social stuff. So your girlfriend and or wife will be left hanging for all these events. In the beginning, anyway. So in the beginning, when you have no seniority and you're low man, and depending on what shift is the most unpopular in your department, you'll be on that shift. So for my department, it was overnights. And I sat there for about 5 years, and it did get bad. After about 5 years, excuse me, towards the end, my wife was saying, I don't like this. I don't like this so much that I wouldn't mind if you didn't want to be a cop anymore. She was basically at the end of her rope with it. She just was sick of the overnight schedule. So luckily, right around that time, I came off midnights and went back to normal. And you do notice it when you're on midnights for a long time. For us, we worked a 5 and 3, so we'd work 5 days on, then we'd have 3 off. So around the third day, you start to feel normal again. And then that day, you have to go in at midnight back to work. So that's a really tough shift, and that just puts more stress on your relationship. So she should definitely be ready for those challenges in your life. And they do have, the academy I went to anyways, they did have the option to bring your wife in and or girlfriend pre-academy, and they kind of give them a talk and kind of let them know about the stresses you'll be going through. And it is really stressful, because when you're doing it, everything is on the line. It feels like your whole life is on the line. It's paramilitary. You can be kicked out. If you screw up too much, you can be booted. With your department, you're on probation, so they can just get rid of you at any time. And, it would be devastating and humiliating, and it would suck to have to go back to friends and family and say, hey, I didn't make it, or then have to try it again. So it's really stressful, and it can be hard on a relationship. But I think if you have an understanding significant other, boyfriend or girlfriend, and you talk about it beforehand, totally doable. It's totally doable. I do have a friend of mine back from Cape Cod who was working for the county at one point and always wanted to be a police officer. His father was a really badass. I think he was in a gang unit in Connecticut. Really badass cop, and he kind of always wanted to do it. So he ended up leaving his county job and getting accepted by local PD and getting accepted into police academy. And he went up for orientation, and they gave the speech about how hard it is and what it can do to a family, so on and so forth. And I even believe maybe his wife was pregnant at the time, or they were trying. That might have been part of the mix. But it was convincing enough to him that he actually quit the police department and went back to work for the county. He was lucky enough to be able to do that, but it freaked him out enough, and he took it serious enough that he actually said, you know what, thanks, but no thanks. I don't want to be a cop. So there is a lot to consider there, but it is, on the positive note, it's totally doable. I am a very average dude. I did not excel really in any way. I did really well in shooting in academy, but that's, most people do fine in that. I did not excel in any way. I did not excel in college or high school academically, and I was able to make it through academy and keep my relationship. And I got married pretty much right when I got out. So it's totally doable, but yes, it is a challenge. It's not, as long as you know what you're getting into, and you guys make sure you take care of your relationship and take care of each other's needs, it's totally fine. And when you get on the job as a young cop, the hours will always be wacky, but as you progress through your career, you'll more than likely get a better choice of shifts and assignments and stuff like that. So it there's light at the end of the tunnel. It doesn't have to be so oppressive the whole time. So I hope that helps you out. That was my experience. It's really all I can talk to. For me, it was fine. My wife was pretty much a saint the whole time. Helped me get through, like I said, helped me crease those uniforms and make sure that I wasn't getting gigged during inspection. So I hope that helps you out, buddy. I hope she stays with you if you're going to go through police academy, and I'm sure you guys will be fine. So that's it for the podcast, guys. I'm trying to line up more interviews. It's becoming increasingly difficult because I'm kind of running out of people I know really well. So I'm kind of I need to get out of my bubble here and really kind of branch out and grab people, recruit people, let's say, to come on. So I got to be a little bit better about that. But podcast is still doing well download-wise. Really appreciate all you guys listening. If you have a subject you want discussed, or if you have questions, anything like that, please don't hesitate to write in and ask me. It's thingspolicec@gmail.com. And also, please go to iTunes, rate and review the podcast. That helps. I think if the listenership keeps growing and gets bigger and more people are listening, I will try to set up, I'll try to monetize the podcast, try to make little do-re-mi off of this. And if I do that, I will designate a certain amount to law enforcement charities. So I don't know how any of that would work, but I know that's a goal of mine. If we can keep growing the podcast, to do that would be really awesome. So thank you for listening again, and I will catch up with you guys next week.